Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unpack complex ideas and try to find those surprising nuggets of insight hiding in plain sight. Today we're diving deep, really deep, into one of the most ambitious, maybe even radical, proposals for global governance you're likely to encounter. We're talking about a complete reimagining of the United Nations. For this deep dive, we've gone through a pretty comprehensive set of sources, and they don't just suggest reforms. Nope. They propose a UN built basically from the ground up, designed, for the intricate realities of the 21st century. Our mission here is to extract the most important insights from these really detailed proposals. We want to help you understand not just what this new vision entails, but maybe more importantly, why it's being proposed with such urgency. And crucially, what it could mean for all of us.
Yeah, and the core insight from these sources is, well, it's pretty stark. Our current global institutions, they're critically unequipped for the challenges we face now. We're talking about planetary scale challenges. Runaway climate change, for one. The pervasive digital exploitation of personal data. Even the rise of autonomous weapons. These are issues that just didn't exist or certainly weren't understood in the same way back when the current UN was designed. So this deep dive, it really isn't about minor tweaks or, some cosmetic reforms to an old system. It's a call for a fundamental overhaul. The sources suggest the very architecture of global power needs to be rewritten because the world has just dramatically shifted since 1945.
Okay, so let's unpack that diagnosis. Our sources start right there, don't they?
Hmm.
Looking at the problems with the current UN, born in 1945, right after a cataclysmic world war, shaped by the victors, driven by, well, the fear of another global conflict. But nearly 80 years later,
Hmm.
how exactly is it falling short? What are those fundamental flaws these new proposals are trying to address?
The sources are pretty unequivocal on this. The UN Security Council is a major structural flaw. You could argue it's the most debilitating one. Okay, so it has 15 members, but only 5 are permanent. The P5, as they're often called, US, UK, France, Russia, and China.
Right.
And here's the kicker. These 5 wield unilateral veto power,
Right.
meaning any one of them can block any substantive resolution. It doesn't matter how many other nations support it.
Wow.
Yeah. And this leads to profound paralysis, especially on critical global issues where a P5 member or maybe one of its close allies is directly involved. Just think about it. Russia has repeatedly vetoed resolutions condemning its invasion of Ukraine. That makes any effective UN action pretty much impossible.
Right.
The U.S. regularly uses its veto, too, often blocking resolutions critical of Israel, which frustrates, the vast majority of other member states. China also blocks investigations into its domestic affairs or things in its sphere of influence. So the result, it's a system of selective morality, really,
Yeah.
an institution that often grants impunity for the powerful. And it leaves the UN unable to act decisively where it matters most. The world is just left waiting for solutions to urgent crises like Ukraine or the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It basically gives 5 nations the power to hold the whole world hostage on peace and security.
So, okay, the Security Council is paralyzed by the veto. What about the General Assembly? I mean, that looks like global representation, right? All
Yeah.
193 member states are in there. But our sources argue it's effectively powerless. How does that actually play out? Why isn't it enough?
That's a really crucial distinction. The General Assembly's votes, they're non-binding.
Non-binding.
Okay? It can express moral consensus, sure. It can convene important debates, pass hundreds of resolutions every year. But it has zero enforcement authority. It's mainly a forum for discussion. Critics often call it, maybe unfairly, maybe not, a talk shop. It's not a seat of real power that can compel action. And beyond that, the one vote per country model, well, it seems fair on the surface, right? Egalitarian.
Yeah, that sounds democratic.
But it creates these severe disproportions that actually undermine its legitimacy. Think about this. Tuvalu, a small island nation, maybe 11,000 people.
Tiny.
Tiny. It has the exact same voting power as India, with 1.4 billion people.
Well, that's, yeah.
Or China, also 1.4 billion. So this disproportion means a small group of microstates could theoretically outvote the world's most populous nations. And that breeds deep resentment, particularly among larger countries, whether by population or economy. It contributes to the overall ineffectiveness. There's this feeling that its resolutions don't truly represent the global will. And it raises a really important question for you, for all of us. Is that truly just representation? Or is it just a relic of a past era that doesn't really serve global fairness or effectiveness anymore?
So given these pretty fundamental flaws, the sources then pivot. They move to this really radical proposition, a stark choice, framed as the 5% for war delusion versus 1% for peace. What's the core argument there? What's this reorientation about?
This is where the sources really start to challenge conventional thinking, I think. They point to a recent proposal from NATO leaders, suggesting each member nation should allocate a full 5% of its GDP to military spending.
5%, that sounds like a lot.
It's huge. If implemented across all 32 NATO members, this would push collective military spending over $5 trillion annually.
5 trillion.
A staggering sum. It would dwarf the military budgets of basically the rest of the world combined. The sources argue this isn't just a strategic blunder, it's, well, they call it economic madness, a path to perpetual escalation. Well,
They contend that military spending is often incredibly inefficient. Weapon systems go over budget, they underperform, they become obsolete quickly.
right, hear about that.
And this vast spending, they argue, mostly just feeds the military-industrial complex. It creates this powerful lobby that actually wants continued conflict. It also leads to what they call strategic blowback.
Yeah, where increased military spending by one bloc signals aggression. And that prompts other global actors, like Russia and China, to boost their own defense budgets. It's an escalatory cycle that, the sources argue, actually erodes global security instead of increasing it. So instead, they propose this radical alternative. What if every UN member state allocated just 1% of its GDP? That's around $1 trillion annually, given current global GDP. Just 1% for a new global peace architecture. With that money, they argue, we could actually address the real existential security threats facing humanity. Things like pandemics, climate change, widespread hunger, persistent inequality is framed as a fundamental choice: mutually assured instability or globally shared progress.
That's a powerful contrast. Okay, so $1 trillion for peace. The sources then detail what that could actually achieve, right? It sounds ambitious, but they present it as just a fraction of what's currently maybe misspent. What could that trillion realistically do?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the examples they give are concrete and potentially transformative. It shows a completely different security paradigm.
Yeah.
Imagine fully funding universal pre-kindergarten and higher education globally,
Wow.
ensuring every child gets quality early learning and every willing student can pursue higher studies regardless of income or country. That's not just schooling. That's building human capital, fostering innovation, breaking poverty cycles across generations.
Huge potential impact.
Huge. Or this sum could build the massive green infrastructure we desperately need for the climate crisis,
Yeah.
accelerating the shift to renewables, sustainable agriculture, climate adaptation in vulnerable regions. We're talking smart grids, massive reforestation, resilient cities on a global scale.
Okay.
It could establish truly robust global health surveillance and pandemic readiness systems, preventing future catastrophes like COVID-19. That means funding vaccine research and distribution equitably, strengthening health systems everywhere, having rapid response teams ready,
So health, education, climate.
and more. The fund could fuel massive job creation through sustainable development projects, invest in cutting-edge research for societal good, think clean energy breakthroughs, disease eradication, food security, and work towards eliminating extreme poverty globally, lifting billions out of dire conditions. The sources call this approach peace as infrastructure. Tangible investments building resilience and cooperation, not just deterrence.
Peace as infrastructure. I like that framing.
Yeah, it includes things like early warning systems for conflicts, but systems that identify root causes, not just symptoms. Cross-border data integration for climate and food security monitoring to prevent famine. Developing open-source digital democracy platforms to empower participation at every level. It's not just about preventing war, it's proactively building the conditions for lasting, equitable peace and shared prosperity.
Okay, so if the old system is broken, maybe holding us back, what does this new institution actually look like? Our sources lay out several foundational concepts for a complete overhaul. Let's start with what they call a revolutionary idea for representation, the 40-40-20 formula. Can you explain how that works?
Right, the 40-40-20. This aims to fundamentally rewrite the rules of global representation and power sharing in a restructured UN. Moving away from that one country, one vote imbalance we talked about, and also away from the P5's arbitrary power. It's designed to strike a nuanced balance between democratic legitimacy, the voice of the people, economic responsibility, acknowledging a nation's contribution, and sovereign equality, preserving the dignity and voice of every nation, big or small.
So how does the formula break down?
It's precise. 40% of the total voting power is allocated by population. That reflects the people's voice. Another 40% is allocated by GDP, acknowledging economic contribution and responsibility. And the remaining 20%. That's allocated by equal representation, maintaining the traditional principle, one country, one vote for all member states. It's a hybrid model designed to ensure representation without domination.
That sounds complex, but also, yeah, really thoughtful. Could you give us a sort of mathematical illustration, maybe walk through a couple of examples?
Absolutely. Let's imagine, for simplicity, a restructured UN has 1,000 total voting points to distribute.
Okay, 1,000 points.
Under the 40-40-20 formula, 400 points are distributed based on population share, calculated annually, let's say. Another 400 points are based on GDP share, maybe a rolling 5-year average to smooth things out.
Yeah.
And the final 200 points, distributed equally among all member nations. So if there were 200 nations, each gets one sovereign vote point. If for 193, maybe slightly more than 1 point each, totaling 200. So let's take India. Huge population, rapidly growing, but still mid-range GDP. In this 1,000-point system, India might get, say, around 70 population votes, given its GDP, maybe around 35 economic votes, plus its crucial one sovereign vote point, or slightly more, totaling around, say, 106 votes. Significant weight, but not dominant.
Okay, in a smaller country.
Right. Consider Luxembourg, small population, high GDP per capita. It might get just zero point 0.1 population vote points, maybe zero point 0.3 economic vote points, but it would still retain its crucial one sovereign vote point for a total of maybe 1.4 votes. This model really ensures that while larger, more economically powerful nations have a greater say reflecting their impact, smaller states aren't erased. They keep significant influence through that sovereign vote, acknowledging their fundamental equality. It forces collaboration.
That clarifies it a lot. But it raises the question, how does this stop block power? Address concerns that giants like China and India would just dominate everything.
That's exactly where the cleverness of the 40-40-20 formula comes in, according to the sources. Its design makes it inherently difficult for any single country or even an existing bloc, China, the US, the EU, the G77, to dominate all three categories at once.
Oh, okay.
So China and India, yes, significant population weight. But they wouldn't necessarily dominate the GDP component, where the US and Europe still hold more sway. Conversely, the US might lead in GDP, but not population. And that 20% one nation, one vote part ensures smaller states, collectively over 130 nations, retain considerable influence. They become powerful swing votes, especially if they band together.
So it forces coalition building.
Exactly. It requires dialogue, compromise, broad consensus to pass anything significant. Hallmarks of a functioning democracy, really. The sources explicitly say this structure preserves balance, and it could even be tweaks later, maybe factoring in purchasing power parity or carbon emissions, making it dynamic, preventing static power imbalances.
Okay, building on that, the sources tackle something even bigger conceptually, moving from nation states to federated governance. That sounds like fundamentally rethinking sovereignty. How do they see that playing out?
Yeah, this directly challenges the whole 1648 Westphalian system. That idea of absolute nation-state sovereignty, where countries are independent silos with exclusive control inside their borders and non-interference, is key.
The bedrock of international relations for centuries.
Right. But the sources argue it's completely outdated for the 21st century. The reality is, global issues, climate change, cybercrime, data flows, pandemics, capital movement, they just don't respect borders. So sovereignty, in this view, isn't a rigid shell anymore. It's porous, it's shared, it's interconnected. Federated governance means shared sovereignty through what they call layered authority.
Layered authority.
Meaning local, regional, national, and global institutions coexist. Power is distributed functionally across these layers, and crucially, decisions get made at the most local level possible. That's the principle of subsidiarity.
Subsidiarity, okay.
It means issues should be handled by the lowest, most immediate level of authority that's competent to resolve them. This enhances local autonomy, but still allows for global cooperation when needed. Sovereignty is shared, not surrendered. It's recognizing some problems are just too big for one nation alone.
So what does that look like in practice? And how does it connect to this idea of planetary citizenship? That sounds like a big shift in identity.
In practice, layered authority means, say, city governments manage their urban emissions targets. But global treaties, set by the new UN, establish the overarching climate goals and maybe carbon pricing.
Okay.
Nations still regulate tech within their borders, but a global AI safety board sets universal ethical guidelines, maybe limits on autonomous weapons. Local courts handle everyday disputes, but international courts handle crimes against humanity, ecocide, cross-border data breaches. You see the layers?
Yeah, I do. And planetary citizenship fits in how?
That's the human dimension. It means every person, regardless of their passport, has basic global rights: health, education, climate safety, digital privacy, dignity. And crucially, they can participate in global decisions affecting them. The sources imagine secure, portable, privacy-respecting digital identity systems. These would ensure recognition and participation across borders, maybe allow people to vote in global referenda or join global deliberations.
Interesting.
It's about fostering one world responsibility, a sense of shared stewardship, mutual accountability. It's not about a monolithic one world government erasing national identities. It's recognizing our well-being is tied to the planet's well-being and everyone else's.
That is a powerful shift, which leads us to this parallel the sources draw. From colonial empires to data empires. We think of colonialism as past, but they argue its logic continues, just in a new form. What is this modern extraction? And who are the new imperial centers?
This is fascinating. The argument is the fundamental logic of empire extracting value from the periphery to benefit a powerful core has just been reimagined, maybe even reinforced, in the digital age. Old empires extracted land, labor, minerals.
Right.
Modern data empires, they argue, extract something maybe more insidious. Personal data, human attention, even our behavior. The tools aren't military might or colonial admin anymore. They're complex algorithms, huge digital platforms, ubiquitous surveillance tech.
Things we use every day.
Exactly. And the governance. It's often through those non-negotiable terms of service we all click on, not formal colonial rule. The new colonial subjects, in this view, they call them the digital South. Nations, marginalized groups who generate immense data, often without knowing it, without compensation, without control.
And where does that data go?
It gets funneled to the new imperial centers. A handful of powerful tech giants, Google, Meta, Amazon, OpenAI, and data-rich states like the US and China. These entities wield enormous, often unregulated influence over economies, information, social behavior, even politics. Without much transparency or accountability, data is the new oil, they say. A potent new form of geopolitical and economic power. And this digital extraction just exacerbates existing inequalities.
That feels incredibly timely given how much tech dominates our lives. So how does the proposed new UN tackle this new kind of empire, this digital exploitation?
The sources propose a pretty robust response, starting with a foundational UN charter for the digital age.
Okay, a digital charter, what's in it?
It would declare digital rights like universal internet access, data privacy, algorithmic transparency, personal data agency as fundamental human rights, ensuring universal access and protection online. It would also regulate cross-border data flows, moving beyond national silos to set global norms for data sovereignty, ensuring data generated in one place isn't just exploited by another, and crucially, it would establish enforceable norms for platform accountability, holding tech giants responsible for their impacts on human rights, democracy, information integrity.
Accountability is key there.
Definitely. And beyond the charter, they suggest creating a powerful new global data authority.
Oh.
This body would have real teeth, power to audit algorithms for bias, certify data security standards for platforms, mediate cross-border data disputes fairly. They even float radical concepts like data repatriation.
Repatriation
Meaning data generated, say, in the global south, should be owned and stored locally, benefiting local economies, not just siphoned off to foreign servers, and even digital reparations to address past exploitation, ensuring the benefits from aggregating global data are shared equitably, not just flowing to the core centers. It's about breaking the code of digital empire, reclaiming digital sovereignty for everyone.
Okay, so what does this all mean for unlocking, as the sources put it, trillions for humanity? They propose the new UN could redirect those massive military budgets we talked about, finally making that peace dividend real.
Yes, it's a fundamental, transformative argument. The sources contend that global military spending over $2.4 trillion a year now, just staggering, is basically an untapped reservoir of wealth. Wealth that could be reallocated for human flourishing on a planetary scale. Remember the peace dividend promised after the Cold War?
Vaguely, yeah. Never really happened, did it?
Not really. Military budgets kept climbing, even as climate change, poverty, health crises were crying out for funds. The sources detail how just a fraction of this specifically, that 1% of GDP contributed to the new UN, could establish robust global climate transition funds. financing the rapid shift to green economies, critical climate adaptation in vulnerable regions, accelerating decarbonization, supporting resilient infrastructure, helping communities on the front lines.
That alone would be huge.
Huge. And it could create comprehensive pandemic preparedness funds, ensuring we're never caught off guard again like with COVID, investing in research, rapid vaccine development, equitable distribution, strengthening health systems worldwide, and launch global education equity funds, guaranteeing universal access to quality learning from early childhood right through higher education, empowering the next generation. This redirection, they argue, fundamentally shifts global incentives away from arms races towards peace races, where development, cooperation, human well-being get the real investment.
Those are profound possibilities. Can you give us some of those inspiring examples the sources mention? Countries that have actually demilitarized and thrived. Proving security isn't just about military might.
Yeah, the sources highlight several really powerful case studies. Costa Rica is probably the most famous one.
Right, they have no army.
Exactly. Abolished their military in 1948. And since then, consistently high levels of education, healthcare, human development. They're a leader in ecotourism, environmental diplomacy. It just beautifully shows that security can be civilian, that investing in people and the environment leads to greater prosperity and stability than military spending. A powerful narrative.
Definitely. Who else?
Well, think about Japan and Germany after World War II. They faced mandatory demilitarization. What did they do? Reinvested heavily in industry, technology, education, not huge standing armies.
They became economic powerhouses.
Exactly. Global economic and technological leaders. It's a testament to the productive power of peace, of strategic reprioritization, channeling national energy into creation, not destruction. Even Rwanda, after the genocide, they made a deliberate choice. Focus on reconciliation, rebuilding, investing in ICT, health, now one of Africa's fastest growing economies. These cases all show that peacebuilding and demilitarization aren't weakness. They're central to prosperity, to a redefined security focused on well-being.
Let's shift gears slightly to global trade. Our sources flat out claim the WTO is broken. That's a strong statement about a foundational institution. How would a reorganized UN rethink trade? Why do they see the WTO's mission as flawed?
It is a strong statement. The sources argue the WTO, despite its promise of a level playing field, is basically paralyzed and in many ways an obstacle to equitable development. Why? Structural biases favoring powerful nations. Developing countries often marginalized in negotiations, dispute resolution. A huge failure point is its appellate body, the top court for trade disputes. It's been non-functional since 2019, paralyzed mainly by U.S. obstruction.
So disputes just don't get resolved.
Exactly. Which undermines confidence in the whole system. Plus, the WTO has largely failed to tackle contemporary issues. Sustainability, labor rights, climate impact, the digital economy. It often promotes growth without adequate guardrails for people or the planet. The sources argue its mission was flawed from the start. It prioritized trade liberalization as an end in itself, kind of disconnected from justice, sustainability, human development. It implicitly allows practices that undermine climate goals or ignore basic labor rights, all in the pursuit of lower costs.
And what's the human cost of this broken system? You mentioned a race to the bottom. What does that mean for people?
The sources claim the WTO's focus on zero tariffs and deregulation fuels this severe race to the bottom. Countries compete by lowering environmental standards, weakening labor protections, offering cheaper, often exploited workforces. Widespread issues like sweatshops, child labor, land grabs, particularly in developing nations, as industries seek the lowest production costs. This system creates deep dependency and vulnerability in global South economies, locks them into exporting raw materials, makes them vulnerable to supply chain shocks like we saw vividly during the pandemic. And trade sanctions, meant as punitive measures, are often wielded as economic weapons, crippling nations, hitting civilian populations hardest. Think U.S. sanctions impacting Iran's ability to get essential medicines. Humanitarian crises result. The WTO is largely silent on this weaponization of trade. Its rules just aren't equipped for it, nor does its mandate really cover protecting human rights or the environment in the same way it prioritizes trade flows.
So how does the new UN fix this, according to the sources?
It proposes a complete philosophical shift and institutional replacement, a Global Trade and Development Forum, GTDF, to replace the WTO.
GTDF.
This new body would operate under that 40-40-20 voting structure, changing the power dynamics right away. Its explicit mandate: harmonize trade with the Sustainable Development Goals, fully integrate labor and environmental standards into trade deals, promote tech transfer to developing nations, and prioritize fair trade over free trade.
Fair trade over free trade. That's a significant shift.
It is. It means trade should serve people and the planet first, not just corporate profit or narrow national interests, building a global economy that's equitable, sustainable, and actually serves human well-being.
Okay, finally, the sources make a strong case for a multilingual UN for a multipolar world. They advocate for 5 core languages: Mandarin, English, Hindi, Spanish, and Arabic. Why is language reform so crucial? Seems maybe it's secondary to some.
It might seem secondary, but the sources argue language is much more than just communication. It's fundamentally the architecture of power itself. The current 6 official UN languages, English, French, Spanish, Arabic, Russian, Chinese, they reflect post-WWII power, not today's reality. English, particularly, dominates international business, science, tech, diplomacy, even though less than 20% of the world speaks it natively. This creates profound linguistic hierarchies, gatekeeping. It marginalizes non-native speakers and non-Western knowledge systems in global discussions.
You mean ideas from English-speaking cultures get more weight?
Implicitly, yes. Intellectual domination by Anglophone ways of thinking. It also slows negotiations, causes misunderstandings, breeds resentment. The sources argue true linguistic justice is overdue, and a 5-language core is essential for genuine representation, equitable cultural participation, and political legitimacy in a truly multipolar world.
So why these 5 specifically? Mandarin, English, Hindi, Spanish, Arabic. And what impact would this have? It sounds like a huge undertaking.
They were chosen carefully, based on population numbers, geographical reach, political representation, and cultural diversity. Together, these 5 cover over 60% of humanity, all inhabited continents, diverse cultures, religions, histories, ideologies. Think about Hindi, over 600 million speakers, yet currently excluded.
Good point.
This selection ensures political and cultural balance, actively prevents one region or civilization dominating the discourse, and yes, it's a massive undertaking. Decades of investment needed. Ubiquitous interpretation and translation every meeting, document, publication. Extensive multilingual diplomacy training. Open source linguistic AI assistance to help break barriers.
Wow, yeah.
But the impact? Transformative. It makes language access a public good. Democratizes participation, makes justice, information, global decision-making accessible in your own voice. It's about more than convenience. It's decolonizing knowledge, amplifying diverse narratives, transforming the global stage into a space of true dignity, where every voice is heard, understood, respected, regardless of origin, a tangible expression of an inclusive global community. And if we connect all this back to the bigger picture, the sources argue pretty forcefully that decades of failed UN reform efforts, particularly around that Security Council veto, they prove the institution just cannot be saved. It has to be replaced. They call the official review process an illusion, dismiss past attempts as cosmetic reforms that didn't touch the fundamental power imbalances or the exclusion of the global south. The world's changed dramatically since '45. New economic powers, demographic shifts, the digital revolution, truly planetary threats. But the UN, still frozen in outdated legal language, old protocols, increasingly irrelevant. It's like, trying to navigate the internet age with the telegraph machine.
So they're not suggesting tinkering, not gradual evolution. It's dissolve and rebuild. Is there actually a legal case for that? Or is it just an ideal?
Surprisingly, the legal case is strong and the sources lay it out. The UN Charter isn't sacred, immutable text. It's a treaty. Article 109 even allows for a general review conference to amend it, though it's never worked because powerful countries block it. But more fundamentally, sovereign nations always retain the right to exit a treaty if it no longer serves them. And new treaties can always replace old ones if enough states agree. There are clear historical precedents. The League of Nations was replaced by the UN itself when the League failed.
Right, I forgot about that.
And JDT, the trade agreement, evolved into the WTO. So replacement isn't just theoretical, it's a legitimate, sometimes necessary path when institutions are unfit for purpose. They propose what they call a peaceful exit strategy.
Peaceful exit.
Yeah. A coalition of the future, maybe 30 to 50 pioneering countries, likely many from the global south, forms a new UN via a new charter. This coalition gradually builds parallel institutions. New assembly, new peace council, no vetoes, new trade forum, etc. The old UN, starved of legitimacy, funding, participation, gradually fades into irrelevance through disuse, not through some destructive act. It's a strategic withdrawal from an outdated system to make way for a future-proof one.
That's a fascinating strategy. But who leads this monumental effort? Surely not the existing global powers who benefit from the current system.
Far from it, and this is crucial for the sources. They pinpoint the global south, countries like India, South Africa, Nigeria, Indonesia, Brazil, Egypt, Mexico as the primary protagonists, the driving force. They have the population weight and the moral mandate, having been largely marginalized by the post-WWII order. Their experience dealing with the UN's limits positions them as natural leaders for a more equitable structure.
So leadership from the global south.
Primarily. But not only them. The sources also stress the critical, often overlooked role of a small country coalition. Nations often seen as having less clout, but they possess significant moral authority and strategic leverage through those collective sovereign votes in the 40-40-20 system. And furthermore, civil society organizations, global youth movements, diaspora networks, they're highlighted as absolutely crucial. They legitimize and amplify the call for replacement, ensure it's a bottom-up, people-driven process, not just a top-down diplomatic maneuver, building broad global consensus.
Okay, speaking of partnerships, the sources specifically highlight how this new UN could fundamentally transform U.S.-India relations. Why is that partnership seen as so central to this reimagined world order?
What's really fascinating here is this idea of a global axis waiting to be forged. The sources emphasize India's incredible rise, most populous democracy, nuclear power, booming economy, that amazing digital public infrastructure like Aadhaar and UPI, growing global diplomatic reach.
It's undeniable.
And this increasingly complements the U.S.'s enduring strength, tech leadership, financial power, scientific prowess, global military projection. Crucially, both countries share fundamental democratic foundations: pluralism, rule of law, a mutual skepticism of authoritarianism, a powerful normative basis for collaboration.
So a new UN becomes the platform.
Exactly. A new UN, designed from scratch, provides this unique multilateral platform for them to co-lead the transition, moving from a Western-led order to a truly co-owned, more balanced world. They could jointly design new pillars: a global peace council without vetoes, a digital governance commission protecting rights, maybe merging U.S. tech innovation with India's public digital models. This partnership offers an inclusive alternative to existing power blocks. It could balance China's rise not through confrontation, but through a new model of soft power cooperation, shared values, collective problem solving, building something new together.
And what about the small country coalition, those nations with fewer votes? Are they just supporting actors in this vision?
No, absolutely not just supporting actors. The sources call them the moral and democratic imperative and a strategic fulcrum. Yes, fewer population or GDP votes individually. But in the 40-40-20 model, that 20% equal vote component gives them significant collective power, coalition opportunities. They can swing votes.
How much power, roughly?
Well, representing over 130 UN members, they'd collectively control over 35% of the sovereign votes. That makes them a powerful blocking minority or a decisive swing vote if they align with either the population or GDP blocks. And small states are often on the front lines of crises: climate change, sea level rise, digital vulnerability. They're already leading on issues like climate justice, ocean governance, digital sovereignty. The new UN structure empowers them, lets them leverage their moral authority and diplomatic innovation to set agendas, chair committees, drive policy. The sources envision the new UN being built from the margins inward, ensuring it truly represents all humanity, addresses issues from the perspective of the most vulnerable, giving voice to the historically silenced. Their participation isn't just desired, it's essential for legitimacy and effectiveness.
So how do we get from this compelling vision to actual action? Our sources lay out a roadmap, right? Making it clear this isn't just abstract, but a tangible plan.
Yes, a pragmatic, multi-phase, probably decade-long transformation. Phase 1, building consensus. That means extensive public education, academic discussions, forging coalitions of the willing among nations, civil society, tech communities, culminating in a broad declaration of intent showing critical mass support.
Okay, build support first, then.
Phase 2, convening the foundational process. They envision a new San Francisco conference, echoing the original UN's birth. Here, a new world charter gets drafted and signed by at least 50 nations, that initial coalition of the future, enshrining 40-40-20, the 1% peace contribution, federated governance, digital rights, a diplomatic marathon, but with a clear goal.
And after the charter?
Phase 3, building core institutions, probably running concurrently, establishing the Global Assembly as the main legislature, a Global Peace Council, no vetoes for rapid action,
Okay.
a Commons Authority for Planetary Resources, Oceans, Atmosphere, Orbit, the new GTDF replacing the WTO, and foundational digital participation infrastructure built in from day one, secure, transparent, equitable access for all planetary citizens.
And finally,
Phase 4, operationalizing global governance. The first global budget based on the 1% GDP contributions. Participatory treaties drafted and ratified. Enforcement mechanisms activated focusing on non-military, civilian-led interventions. The whole process emphasizes digital infrastructure, radical transparency, participatory governance, ensuring the new UN is secure, smart, truly representative, radically different from the old one. It's ambitious, yes, but the sources present it as necessary and achievable.
so wrapping this up, what really stands out to you from this deep dive into a totally reorganized United Nations? It's clear the sources believe the world has changed fundamentally, but its core global institutions just haven't kept up. And reforming the old UN, they see it as futile. Instead, replace it with something purpose-built for today and tomorrow.
Yeah, if we connect this to the really big picture, this vision isn't just about changing institutions on paper, it feels like a call for a civilizational leap. Moving from an era defined by great power rivalries, that logic of extraction, outdated ideas of absolute sovereignty, towards one rooted in shared sovereignty, digital dignity, collective stewardship of our planet. It promises to redirect literally trillions from the endless cycle of war and preparing for war towards human well-being and planetary health. It proposes to democratize global power. So the General Assembly actually has teeth. The Security Council's paralysis is gone. Every voice is heard, regardless of a nation's size or wealth. It's a profound redefinition of security itself, away from military might towards environmental resilience, public health, digital integrity, equity for everyone.
Which really leaves a big question for you, the listener, to consider. If the current UN can't truly change, and if a comprehensively designed new one is possible, what responsibilities do we have as planetary citizens to actually help build the future we want? Our forces suggest that building this new United Nations isn't just some utopian dream. They argue it's an urgent necessity, a moral imperative, and a project that demands we all become architects of our shared future, participating in this profound transition from the margins inward, from local to global.